In lesson number 16, we're referring to QuestionBot 2, and we want to reference the ebook because there are a number of instructions that we're going to look at. I will talk through all the steps. You can certainly read this on your own, but during this tutorial, I'm going to reference this book a number of times because there are certain things, certain code that it wants us to add. Now, in the actual source code, we are looking at the folder 16 QuestionBot 2, and if you don't have it open already, you can open ChatBot, and let's go ahead and double click chatbot.xcode proj, and let's open that up. Okay, let's take a look at this. Again, this is a project that is already built for us where a lot of the features, the UI has been created. I'm just opening up these folders because we're going to take a look at a number of these. So we have the main storyboard. If you click once, it's going to open this storyboard. And you'll notice that we have a navigation controller, and we also have a table view prototype here. This is a new view with a bunch of things that we haven't seen before. We'll talk about this at another time, but for now, just know that this UI is built for us. We have a launch screen storyboard, which currently isn't being used, but this is something that in an app you would put like your logo or the app name and maybe your company name, things like that. We have a cell, thinking cell. This is related to the UI table view, which is something that has already been built. We have the conversation cell and an ask cell. Then in the controllers folder, we have the conversation view controller. And this has a lot of code here that's already commented. You can certainly take a look at this. A lot of these things we'll talk about in future videos, but for now, just understand that this contains a lot of the code that handles the back and forth between the question and conversation. In the model, again, remember we've talked about data models. Here we have a struct. We also have an enum. We'll talk about enums at a later video, but notice that this particular one has information for the data model for a message. Question answer, this is something we've seen similar to the previous app that we looked at, where we've got some logic behind it for asking questions and getting a response. Then we have the conversation data source. This is the file that we're going to modify the most to be able to return the data in the conversation. Then we have other things like the app delegate and the info plist. These two files are used to describe the app, kind of the metadata of the app. We'll cover this in future videos as well. All right, let's take a look. Let's go ahead and run this and just see what it's doing. So it looks similar to the previous QuestionBot, but here we can ask it a question. So we're going to say, how are you? And then nothing else happens. Notice down here, if I go back to Xcode, I can open up, and you've got two sides to the console here. Notice down here we have what we call the variables view, and then on the right the console. So if I can hide this by unchecking it, and now I see the console here. Notice here that it says asked to add an answer. That really depends. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the simulator. Let's go back to the book and see where we are at. If you go through, read through this will talk through all the different files. We've kind of talked about them a little bit already. Okay, let me show you this diagram. So we have the conversation view controller, which we've looked at briefly. We have the conversation data source, which is the file that we're going to modify. And notice how this diagram you have the arrow that refers to asking and the arrow that refers to answering. So here's input from the user types, and then what's the answer to the question? We go to the question answer, and then it returns the answer. Now, user is scrolling a table view. The question is how many cells? Well, the table view goes to the conversation view controller and says how many cells, what goes in each cell, and it returns the information. And then the conversation view controller asks to the data source how many messages, what's in each message. So let's go to the next page. We've already looked at this already. We've run it once and nothing's happened. So we saw, let's go look at the data source and see what's happening. First, change the message count property to have a value of 1 instead of 0. Build and run again. You'll see a single message in the conversation. Check in the console and you'll see this message. All right. So we have message count. We are in the conversation data source. Go ahead and change that to 1. Let's save. I can press Command S, or if I go ahead and run this, it will save it automatically. Let's run this again. And let's be sure to look at the console for those results. So, asking for message at index 0, and it returns and it shows hello world. See that? So remember, index 0 is the first value of an array because an array starts at 0. Awesome. Okay, let's go back to the book. So if you ask a question, you'll see nothing changes, but you still see the console message about adding a question answer. So this refers to the logic that's going on. Now, if we change the definition of the message count property to a var instead of let, and set it back to 0, then inside the add question answer methods, I have to add the following line: message count plus equals. Okay, let's go back to our source code in Xcode, and let's change this to a var and set this back to 0. Now, under add question, add answer, remember what it said. Inside the add question and add answer methods, after the print statement, add the following line: message count plus equals 1. So after here we say message count and then plus equals 1, and we do the same here. Plus equals 1. Whoops, I meant to do that without the space there. Plus equals 1. Okay, back to the book. So we build and run and ask a question. You'll see that the right number of messages is displayed. In the console, the data source is being asked for a message at index 0 for the question and 1 for the answer. So let's go and run this. I'm going to stop anything else that was running and go ahead and run it one more time. So now let's go ahead and ask a question. We're saying, how are you today? Question mark. And then notice how it returns. So it says hello world and it returns hello world. Now, what's happening is it's going to the conversation data source and it's getting the question at the value, and then it says asking for message at index 0 and at index 1. Now, notice we see here ask to add answer. That really depends. We're seeing something, but it's not showing up properly. So let's go on and see why that is. So right now, the answers to the data source questions are now how many message? We have as many as I've been told about. Add this question to the conversation. And then what is the message number? The answer is hello world. This is a little better. At least we have the right number of entries, but they're all the same answer. We're going to fix that. So we're working with indexes. The app allows you to ask a question, then it thinks, then it gives you an answer. You're not allowed to ask another question while it's thinking. This means you can assume that each even-numbered message in the conversation, starting at 0, is a question, and each odd-number message is an answer. So to show this, remove the return line from message at and replace it with this code. All right, now let's see how well this may or may not copy very well, but I'm just going to see if I can copy that. I don't know that it will copy very well. Notice how it says message at index. We're going to remember what that was. Okay, so we're going to replace that return line. I'm going to select this and then paste it. Okay, now it almost copied right, but it added some extra some extra text because it doesn't like you to copy and paste from a book. Okay, let's see how that works. All right, let's talk through what this is doing. All right, we're saying if the index modulus 2 or remainder 2 equals 0, that means it's an even number. And what we're saying is that in the data source, the even numbers are the question text and the answers are the odd numbers. And so we're saying if it's an even number, return the question at this of type question, or return answer of type answer. Okay. Now let's go back to the book and see what the next step is. Okay, let's run it one more time and let's see how that goes. Okay, let's ask a question. How are you? Question mark. Question 0, answer 0. So let's take a look at the book. Let's see if we see that we got the same thing. We have question 0, question answer. Now it's showing it, but right now it's not showing the right answer. So we'll look at that here in a minute. So here we need storage. The conversation data source needs a way to store the questions that the user has entered and the answers given by the brain. The method of storage must be able to store as many messages as required, keep the messages in a specific order, give back a message at a specific index. So we've already learned about something that can do this. It's called an array. Add the following property to hold an array of messages. All right, this is the initializer as an empty array. Add this code to the add question to create a new message and store it in the array. Okay, let's go back. So let's go ahead and let's add a comment. We're saying message array, and let's remember what it said. Var messages equals message. This is an empty array. Okay. Now, in this code, we're saying in the add question, so let's copy that. So under here, we're going to paste this. Let's delete the extra stuff. Okay. Now let's go back and let's look at the under add answer. Now notice it says each time the data source is asked to add a question or an answer, it will create a new message and add it to the array. So let's add this here, and we'll delete the stuff, and perfect. Now the next step, remove the conditional statement lines after the print statement in the message at and replace them with this. return message, I don't need to copy that. Return messages index. So instead of showing this, we're saying return messages index. Okay, now build and run and ask some questions. You'll see the conversation is now kept, displayed in the list. You'll see a screen similar to the one shown on the left. Okay, let's check it out. Okay, let's ask a question. How are you? It thinks, that really depends. Why is that? That really depends. Are you sure? I think so, yes. All right, now let's look at the code. Let's see what else we have going on. Now, it says there's no need for the separate message count anymore. Delete the lines from add question, add answer. There you increase the message count, then replace the property with a computed property message count int return messages dot count. So under here, we don't need message count anymore because we're going to specifically, I'm just kind of deleting extra lines. And so here we're creating a calculated variable, var message count, which is an int, return messages dot count. So message count, sorry, I can't remember, what did it say? Message count int return messages dot count. Okay, perfect. Now let's go back. In addition to the ask question, it's nice for the app to welcome the user and ask them to start. To do that, instead of the messages array being created empty, you can add a welcome message. Replace the line where the message array is initialized with this. var messages equals opening line. This creates an array with a single message in it rather than an empty array. You don't need to change anything else since the message count is a computed property that will have the right answer. So let's change that. Wait, what is this saying? Message count. Let's make sure I didn't miss something. Var message count is an int, return messages dot count. Oh, that's because I need to delete that because we're replacing it. I forgot to delete that. So we only have one reference to message count. So we've replaced that. All right, let's do the var messages equals opening line. So here I'm gonna do this where I say opening line, which is our first message. Okay. From the Project Navigator, open the Question Answer Swift under the Model section. Change the logic of the response to question to return your own answers to the questions. All right, and that's it. So what they're saying is under Question Answer, remember we've talked about this in a previous video, where you can change this, you can look for certain text, and you can change the value based on this response, and you can come up with your own. Okay, so now let's review what we've done and talk about how this works, because I think we want to make sure. Let's go ahead and run the app one more time, and let's just talk through what has happened. All right, so now it starts with an opening line. Hello, I'm ChatBot. Please ask me a question. Who are you? That really depends. I was hoping you could help me find my way home. That really depends. Why? I think so, yes. All right. Obviously, it doesn't have all the answers, but this is the way that it starts. Okay. So what happens is when the app starts, it checks to see if there is a message in the messages array. So when you get this code asking for message at index 0, so it's asking for a message, and if there is a message in index 0, then it's going to return that message, which happens to be opening line. Hello, I'm ChatBot. Please ask me a question. When you ask a question, it updates, it creates a message and adds it to the messages array. At the same time, when the question answer returns, it adds an answer to the message array. So it's alternating back and forth. First time it asks for the answer, the next time it adds the question, then it adds the answer, then it adds a question, and back and forth. So what is happening is the conversation data source is saving all of the questions and answers, and it's alternating. So here it's asking for a message at index 1, and then asked to add answer, and that's what it was given. Message, here's a question, it was added, then an answer, then a question, then an answer. So it's going back and forth. All right, very good. Be sure to read through this chapter if you have any other questions, and go ahead and go through the quiz to test your knowledge. All right, thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe and check out the next video.